From the Department of Communication in Phillipsburg, this is a special edition of Inside Government with Cedric Peterson.
To our audience here at home and around the world, you are now Inside Government. In this edition, we're continuing in our series on the road to Parliamentary Elections 2024, where we're having conversations with the key stakeholders that gets our nation prepared for parliamentary elections. My guest in this edition is Chairlady of the Central Voting Bureau, Attorney at Law, Ms. Natalie Tacklin. Ms. Tacklin, it's great to have you as a first-time guest Inside Government. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Cedric. It's an honor to be here.
Just want to get started and with our viewers and listeners in establishing who you are. If no one has gotten an opportunity to meet you, give us some insight about you, your education, your professional background.
Sure. Essentially, a child of the soil, I guess, as they say. Grew up here and, went to, Sister Regina MPC. And then, I went to the Netherlands and then I also studied in the U.S. So I have dual legal degrees. So I have a background in law and from, both a U.S. and Dutch perspective. And after I was finished, I moved back home to try to give back. And, I spent 3 years in private practice, then about 3.5 years working in the public sector, advising government and advising on legislation at the Council of Advice. And from there, since April 2020, started my own law firm, where we're doing a mix of, legislative drafting and advising, but also just corporate legal services and your kind of general practice law firm. So, and then from there, of course, I think people may see more in the news these days of me in things as the chair of the pension fund of APS, and then of course now as well with the voting bureau. So a lot on my plate.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's great to have you back at home, and of course contributing to this brand new democracy that we've built. We started since 2010. Being a lawyer, has that always been your thing, your dream as a child growing up?
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't really remember. I feel like I kind of went back and forth on a couple things, and because I was very good and into the sciences as well, and then I found recently like an old cutout newspaper article from when I was playing competitive junior tennis, and it was like a Daily Herald article that they had interviewed us and I was talking in there about how I wanted to just go into like forensics. So I think I was probably watching too much CSI at the time, and decided that that's what I wanted to do: solve murders by investigating crime scenes. But that quickly turned into something else. And so I think I kind of went back and forth. I think I started there, being one of my dad's best friends was an attorney when I was a small kid, and I remember he was always just kind of like, you're going to be a lawyer. And so I guess I still ended up kind of going that route. It was, I think, a good mixture of all the different types of disciplines that I found interesting.
Well, Natalie, thank you very much for establishing that introduction into yourself in our interview. Let's jump right into now your role, the hat that you're wearing as the chairlady of the Central Voting Bureau and getting us prepared for the parliamentary elections. I want to start off, first of all, with establishing what is the primary mission and goal of the Central Voting Bureau?
For sure. I think, at the heart of it, essentially, our goal is to uphold the democratic foundations of our democracy. And that means we want to administer free, fair, and transparent elections. So, our goal is to ensure that every eligible voter can exercise their right to vote in an environment that's not only secure, but it's also efficient and inclusive and accessible. So, we're really trying to uphold the highest standards of electoral integrity.
Yeah, exactly. So, break that down for us. How does the Central Voting Bureau ensure a fair and transparent electoral process?
So I think there are a couple different things that play into it, and I think maybe the primary one is we ensure that there's strict adherence to our electoral laws. So we operate within the framework of St. Martin's electoral legislation. So that's the electoral ordinance, and then there's an underlying electoral decree, and of course our constitution, of course, being the guiding one on top of that. So, and we make sure that those rules are enforced without bias to any party or individual. And besides that, I think another element that's important is the fact that The Voting Bureau is an independent body, and in that sense that we're free from any political interference, and we oversee, and we're free in that sense to oversee the electoral process. So we ensure impartiality in that sense. And I think another example is transparent vote counting. So the process of the vote counting at the polls at the end of the evenings, they're open to scrutiny by everyone. Whether that's international observers that we've allowed to come into the process, or if it's representatives of political parties, the media, every stakeholder is open to stand there and verify the count. And I think that's part of the transparency. And besides that, I would say to accessibility, to information. We ensure that we try to make sure that all information gets out to the public. Whether it's the voter registration data, the polling locations, the voting procedures. We're trying to ensure that all of that gets out there so that people are informed. And I mentioned observers before, but of course we also we collaborate and facilitate both local and international observers to monitor all stages of our electoral process and provide their independent assessments.
Okay, I want to break down the key steps so our viewers and listeners can follow along in the process, because it is a process. What are the key steps involved in preparing for parliamentary elections in St. Martin?
I think if I think back on the last couple of months, this is my first election, or even involvement with the electoral process in that sense. So what we did, we started a few months ago, really, with the Ministry of General Affairs, and when it just came down to the planning and the organization. So establishing the timelines, outlining the procedures, and kind of starting to mobilize the resources that we need to conduct an election. And that came down into, hey, what is the election date going to be, to give people an example of the discussions that we had, because all of these things are very clearly stipulated in the law. It says very much like, between this many days and this many days from that date, this has to happen. And so it's there's a huge Excel sheet that we have to essentially be calculating backwards from the last sitting, the end of the parliamentary term. So that's so we started that way, and then of course you could think of the voter registration process. Our voters registry closed on the 23rd of October. And so, trying to make sure that people go in and get their information up to date. Things that we're also doing is the one that, I think sticks out to everybody is, of course, the nomination process. So postulation day on November 22nd. So we manage, the submissions of the candidate lists, and we verify that the eligibility of the candidates, and we approve the final list of candidates. And then from there, of course, we're starting to get towards, logistical preparations, where the civil registry are really our right hand and our boots on the ground when it comes to really the grunt of the work. So, they're in the process also of looking for people to work in the polling stations, and of course to educate them and prepare them and give them training. So all of these are parts of it. We're in discussions now, even when it comes to security. On November 13th, we have a session with Carl John, with the chief of police, with all the party representatives, to talk about public order considerations and how the police play a role into this. And then, as we move forward closer to January election, January 11th, of course, then we're doing things like, setting up polling stations, ensuring that we have everything in place, even, ordering the ballots. There's all this administrative, stuff that comes along with it as well.
How does the Central Voting Bureau handle voter registration, if any, and voter information updates? And you did make mention of your partnership with the Civil Registry.
Correct.
Give a little bit more insight there in regard to that collaboration.
Sure. So actually, the maintenance of the voter registry and everything, it's a matter of the Ministry of General Affairs, so that officially falls under them. And so as the Voting Bureau, all we're doing is trying to keep the deadlines in mind. We sent out notices to the public, letting them know when the voter registry was closing, so that they could make sure to get in there. That we were like, if you're not registered on the 23rd of October, you're not going to be able to vote. So that is how we collaborate in that sense with the Ministry of General Affairs. And I think by the time people will have seen this recording, we would also have done a joint press release with the Ministry of General Affairs to to let the population know at least what the registered amount of voters is currently. And of course, we protect privacy and don't provide a list of the names of all the individuals that are eligible to vote. However, we do give general data such as the breakdown between male and female, the total amount, and I think there may be some distinctions also in terms of where some people were born, since not all people with Dutch nationality were born in Saint Martin necessarily.
Exactly, right. Could you describe the process of candidate registration for parliamentary elections in Saint Martin? Sure.
So what we all call postulation day, I guess on the street here a little bit. So we're scheduled for the 22nd of November. On the 8th of November, or today actually, this evening, we're holding or by the time the viewers have seen this, it'll be a little bit later. But that's kind of how we interact with the parties. We, as a voting bureau and the civil registry, we've planned an information session with all the party representatives and the candidates if they would like to come. And then, of course, on November 22nd, that's when everybody has to submit their list. And the way it works is, it's determined in the law that that they're able to submit their list between 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. And of course, this is only valid for parties that have registered themselves with the Electoral Council prior to, I believe the deadline was October 11th, off the top of my head. So, and from there, we have a checklist, and I don't know if you want me to mention the things that they need to submit on that day. Or yeah, sure, I can do that.
Absolutely.
So, for example, there's something called a Model 2 form. It's the one that it's accompanied to the kiesbesluit, and essentially that one is the candidate list, and that list has to be submitted, by the official registered representative of the party or their deputy. And then, with that, they bring proof of registration of the political party and their designation at the Electoral Council. Along with that, they also have to submit a consent from each of the candidates. So each candidate on the list must provide a signed declaration of consent to their nomination. And there's a model form for that as well. However, if a candidate is not currently in Saint Martin, then it's form free, meaning that they're free to send an email or anything like that. So that's the second one. Besides that, they have to get something, in Dutch it's called the kiesgerechtigdeverklaring, but it's basically an eligibility confirmation. So it's a statement from actually signed by myself, which they can also acquire through the census office. And that confirms that candidate is eligible to vote according to a certain article of the electoral ordinance. And then, of course, every list has to be accompanied by a black and white photo of 4 by 6 centimeters of the number one candidate on the list. So not all the candidates, just the person that's highest ranked. And then, of course, every party also has to pay the 2,000 guilder deposit, which they pay at the receivers, and they add the receipt to that. So I think it's those 5 different things that they have to kind of check off on postulation day, and that's what they hand in. And from there, the process doesn't stop there. Of course, if a party did not win a seat in the previous election, then we move on to what they call, the endorsements. So that's the day after postulation day, that they have to, go and acquire a certain amount of signatures, which is 1% of the validly cast votes in the previous election. So for this year, that number is 134. And of course, we verify the submissions after postulation day. And if there are any deficiencies, we write the parties and we let them know what these deficiencies are, and they're given 3 days to cure those deficiencies. And then, of course, there's a public hearing in which we, validate all the lists.
Having a conversation with attorney-at-law Natalie Tacklin. She's the chairlady of the Central Voting Bureau as we prepare for parliamentary elections 2024. Stay with us. My conversation with Ms. Tacklin continues right after the break. We'll get into how the Central Voting Bureau, goes about making sure that electoral fraud and irregularities are checked. Stay with us. You're Inside Government.
The Ombudsman. The Ombudsman is here for you. The Ombudsman. We're here for you. The Ombudsman. We're here for you. The Ombudsman is here for you. The Ombudsman. We're here for you. The Ombudsman. We're here for you. Good governance is a must. This institution you can trust. Guardian of the Constitution. Not one but more solutions for complaints against the government. Protectors of the citizens. Promoting good governance in our friendly island, St. Martin. The Ombudsman is here for you. The Ombudsman. We're here for you. The Ombudsman. We're here for you.
The Ombudsman is the voice and protector of the people. Visit us at E. Camille Richardson Street, number 13 on the Police Station Road in Phillipsburg.
Hi, everyone. If you're just tuning in, I'm having a conversation with Chairlady of the Central Voting Bureau, Attorney at Law, Miss Natalie Tacklin. We're talking about the road to Parliamentary Elections 2024 that's scheduled to take place on January 11th, 2024, where we all be heading back to the polls to elect our new members of Parliament to represent us for the next 4 years. But of course, our conversation is about the nation's preparation for parliamentary elections, and that's why we've invited key stakeholders. If you missed my first series interview with the Electoral Council with Mr. Richard Gibson Jr., be sure to tune in and catch video on demand at the YouTube channel of the Government of St. Martin, of course, the Facebook page at the Government of St. Martin. But right now we're talking to the Central Voting Bureau in our next part of our series. Ms. Tacklin, we left off talking about the necessary steps that the Central Voting Bureau takes in order to prepare the country. And we're going to continue along the lines of security. Looking at that subject that you brought up earlier, how does the Central Voting Bureau address issues related to electoral fraud or irregularities?
I think that's a pretty broad question. You know, I think anything that happens, of course, during the election process, you know, we look at on a case-by-case basis, and we assess it accordingly. You know, if we notice any, or if there, you know, any, let me say, for some reason I have a Dutch word in my head, but if we have anybody kind of ringing any alarm bells at polling stations telling us that they see strange things, of course, those types of stories circulate, you know, on election day, and you know, we ensure that there's a safe environment, you know, at the polling station with police involvement, and of course, you know, there's police stationed at all the polling stations, and you know, we'll address those issues as they come up, and of course, if we do have any, you know, idea of irregularities or things like that, you know, we could take such steps as recounting certain polling stations, you know, to really go through the count again. You know, it really very much would depend on the type of irregularity that we noticed, and of course we try to ensure that everything within the polling station happens in accordance with the law.
So this next part that I want to get into is, because it's built on the concept of, you know, stronger together. And we are a small community, and we have these independent organizations like yourself, the Central Voting Bureau, we have the Electoral Council, but all play a role in preparation for the country's parliamentary election. So the question is how does the Central Voting Bureau play a role, if any, or in partnership with the Electoral Council, in overseeing campaign financing and expenditure?
We don't. That's
Okay.
Yeah. So our roles are quite divided, and we have no role when it comes to overseeing the campaign financing and expenditure. That's very much just based on that national ordinance, which, you know, which is also, you know, the one that says the Electoral Council does that job. But, you know, honestly, these days I like to any parliamentarian, or maybe any future parliamentarian, you know, I implore our incoming parliamentarians to consider merging the two entities, you know, because I have noticed that people no one knows the difference between them. I constantly am asked if I'm the chair of the Electoral Council, and I understand the confusion, and I think it would be much more efficient if we just had one body and you task them with these different tasks relating to elections and to the entire process, both the actual elections themselves as well as the years in between when it comes to registration and financing and expenditures.
Brilliant idea, because I'm all about efficiency, and I think that's exactly what a 16 square mile, 37 square mile by extension island needs, is to be efficient
Absolutely.
in how we go about handling the business of the people. Can you provide information about the composition of the Central Voting Bureau? Who are its key members?
So we have 5 members. By law, the law stipulates that the Central Voting Bureau consists of 5 members and a maximum of 2 substitute members. So right now we are composed of 7 individuals, so 5 members and 2 substitutes. And so that would be myself, and then Sandy Ofrinka is my vice chair. And then, of course, we have Mr. Anastasio Baker, Mercedes James, and Ingrid Arundel. And then our 2 substitutes are Mr. Mario Grums and Ms. Carla Vlon.
What are the qualifications and selection criteria for individuals serving on the Central Voting Bureau?
So the law doesn't stipulate, any profiles or qualifications or criteria. However, the law does say that there's an appointment committee, and that appointment committee is comprised of the president of the Joint Court of Justice, the vice chair of the Council of Advice, and the chair of the General Audit Chamber. So they are the ones that that actually nominate the candidates, and then of course they're appointed by the governor and the Minister of General Affairs. So I think the way that it's gone, over the years is, typically the voting bureau will recommend people to the nomination committee, but at the end of the day, they're completely free to judge and to look, and of course, they'll make us, submit things like a certificate of good conduct and all of that, because you are being sworn in, you are swearing an oath, and to uphold the Constitution and our democracy. So, those are all things that are taken into account, I think, as well. But there aren't necessarily any profiles or qualifications, but we do want people that are hard workers and that are that are very precise in their work, and because it is a lot of work organizing an election, and we can't afford to make mistakes, because we are carrying the democracy on our shoulders to an extent.
Absolutely. How does the Central Voting Bureau maintain its impartiality and its independence, which you indicated earlier, in the electoral process?
And again, I've said we try to stay away completely from the party politics, and we have, and the way that we implement the law in that sense, it's impartial, it's unbiased. There's no preference to any political party. Everybody is treated the same, and I think that's the only way. And I hope that and I can only implore in my members that they keep a strong moral compass and they understand where the things that we should and should not do. And of course, as a member of the Central Voting Bureau, you don't want to be walking around with a T-shirt from a certain political party. You have to maintain your impartiality in all manners, and that's throughout the election season and perhaps even after, because you don't want to have those things coming up. So I think it's very important to to take those things into consideration. And not to be seen standing at at a rally for a particular party and not for another one. So at least in everything that I do as chair, we very much don't want to show any type of party politics or any preference for one party over the next. And even when we've gotten requests from parties to come and speak to their members and things like that, we always tell them, listen, if we do this for one party, we have to do it for all the parties. So we prefer to have sessions where we invite everyone, and that information is given in the exact same way to everybody. So those are the ways I think that we try to really maintain our impartiality and independence, and really, not because you know me that I'll do it for you, and so it's we really try to do it in that way.
Natalie, we are running out of time. It's a very short window that we have to talk to you, and I'm sure we can go into so much more, but I want to give you the opportunity to give some insight into the initiatives and improvements the Central Bureau might be looking at or plan to implement to enhance the electoral process in St. Martin.
So, one of the things is, again, that, that I just mentioned about kind of merging the Electoral Council and the Voting Bureau. And the Electoral Council, happens to be an entity that's given a yearly budget. They have a staff member. They do get monthly stipends. They have a budget. They have an office. And, so those are the things that I think if we were to merge, and because the Central Voting Bureau only gets resources during an election, and then those resources are everything that goes into that we have to actually execute the election. And I think what would be beautiful for us is if we were able to merge these institutions, and we were able to then have funding for a website, where an independent website from the Voting Bureau, where we could educate our population on the different parties, put up their manifestos, give people information, be able to also post election results live from an independent website and not the St. Martin Gov website. And also do things with educating our population and voter education, which I think there needs to be more initiatives for. So those are things that there are so many things I think that we would love to do as a voting bureau with the right resources.
Attorney at Law Natalie Tacklin and Chairlady of the Central Voting Bureau of St. Martin, thank you so much for joining me for this edition of Inside Government, and good luck to you and the rest of the Bureau in preparations for Parliamentary Elections 2024.
Thank you.
And to our radio listeners, television viewers, and online viewers, thank you for tuning in and being a part of our conversation in this series of the Road to Parliamentary Elections 2024. If you've missed my conversation with Ms. Tacklin, be sure to catch video on demand at the official Facebook page of the Government of St. Martin at facebook.com/SXMGOV, or be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel of the Government of St. Martin, youtube.com/Government of St. Martin. And for audio playback, be sure to tune into St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM throughout the course of the day. On behalf of our partners at the Central Voting Bureau and all of us here at the Department of Communication, I'm Cedric Peterson. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Something started.
Alrighty.